Hey guys, tonight we step back into a world ruled not just by kings, but by a river. A river with a personality, a memory, and a mean streak when disrespected. You're going to wake up in a hut of sun-baked mud, stretch your sore limbs, and step barefoot into the sticky, silty banks of the Nile's edge. The air is hot before sunrise, and the harvest season has just begun. And you, dear listener, are expected to carry your weight. Every sheaf, every grain, every breath under the sun belongs, legally and spiritually, to Pharaoh. The land is flat, the tools are primitive, and the overseer doesn't smile much. You think you're just here to gather wheat? Oh no, you're here to satisfy the gods, feed the temple, and meet your royal quota, or else. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this harvest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you feel is the itch. It's not dramatic, just that sticky, damp, back of your neck kind of itch that means sweat has already arrived before the sun even peeks over the palm trees. You blink awake in the cramped darkness of your hut, mud walls, reed roof, and one window shaped more by erosion than design. You sit up on a mat that smells like the inside of a burlap sack and run your fingers through your hair, which now seems to contain both straw and a small beetle. You flick it off, it flicks back. You're in ancient Egypt, and today is not a day off. Outside, the air is thick. Even the flies are sluggish, hovering like drunk ghosts. The ground squelches under your feet as you step outside. The Nile is receding from its annual flood, leaving behind a thick blanket of black silt, prime for planting, prime for harvesting, and unfortunately prime for taxing. Your plot is modest. Technically it's yours. Realistically it's the Pharaoh's, everything is the Pharaoh's. Your tools are simple. A curved wooden sickle with flint blades, a straw basket patched so many times it's more stitch than basket, and hope, mostly blind, sometimes bitter. Other farmers are already gathering near the river, trudging barefoot with shoulders slumped and eyes still halfway in the dream world. Someone coughs, someone else swears at a stubborn donkey. A few children chase frogs with unearned enthusiasm. Then, as if conjured by dread, the temple overseer appears. He rides a cart pulled by 2 oxen and wears a linen tunic that's too clean to be trusted. His staff bears a carved ankh, and his ledger tablet is already unrolled. He doesn't look at the people, he looks at the fields. He's there to calculate what you owe. 4 sheaves per row, minimum, he announces without turning his head. Short rows will be inspected, delays will be recorded. A few of the older workers sigh. A younger one mutters something about a curse under his breath. You don't join in. You're too busy doing the math. You have exactly enough energy for a full day's labour if nothing goes wrong. Spoiler, something always goes wrong. You wade out into the field and the mud sucks at your ankles like it wants to keep you. Your first cut with the sickle is clumsy. You're not new to this, but it still takes a minute to find the rhythm. Grab the stalks low, angle the blade, quick snap, tie them in a bundle, stack, repeat. Your back complains by the second row. Your fingers already feel raw. This harvest will take days, if the weather holds, if your tools last, and if the Nile doesn't change its mind. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians truly believed the Pharaoh was a god, or just a guy with good PR. But out here, the difference doesn't matter. When the tax collectors come, they don't care about floods or blisters. They care about numbers, and the numbers are stacked against you. At midday, the sun becomes a hammer. You pause only long enough to sip warm water from a leather pouch that tastes like whatever animal it came from. Your stomach growls. You eat a piece of bread that feels more like compacted gravel. You check the pile. It's not enough, not even close. A small boy from the next farm over waves to you with a frog in his hand. He's smiling. You envy that. Not the frog, the lightness, the not knowing. He hasn't yet counted how many bundles he needs to survive the year. By nightfall, your knees feel like wet rope. You've stacked less than half your row. A nearby worker collapses in the mud, prompting a muttered prayer and a shake of the head from a passing scribe. No one stops working. No one can afford to. You walk home with your sickle dragging behind you, carving a lazy line in the dirt. Back in your hut, the beetle is gone, but the straw still scratches. You fall asleep with the distant sound of frogs, buzzing flies, and the knowledge that tomorrow will be harder. The harvest has begun, the Nile is given, the Pharaoh is watching. You wake to the sound of coughing, not yours, not yet, but deep, wet, and close enough to make you wonder if someone just coughed up a frog. Probably your neighbour again. He's been hacking like that since the last flood season, and the temple healer keeps prescribing the same thing: garlic paste, honey, and a chant whispered 3 times into the wind. Spoiler, it hasn't worked. Your back aches before you even move. Sleeping on a reed mat over packed dirt doesn't do favours for your spine. You twist to sit upright, wincing as each vertebra wakes up with its own complaint. The air inside your mud brick hut is thick with heat, even though the sun hasn't fully risen. It smells like old sweat, scorched clay, and that one unlucky onion you forgot to eat 3 days ago. The onion, by the way, now resembles a religious artifact, mummified and deeply untrustworthy. You reach for your sandals, or what's left of them, leather straps held together with braided reed fibres and prayer. You're not poor exactly. Everyone's poor. But you are in that special category of the Pharaoh's people known as subsistence labourers, which is a polite way of saying if your harvest fails, so do you. Outside your yard isn't much. A few rough clay pots, a chicken you're trying to pretend you don't plan to eat, and your pride and joy, a very slightly cracked water jug that doesn't leak unless you tip it wrong, treasure. Your wife is already up, sweeping dust from a place that is fundamentally made of dust. She gives you a tired smile. Your 2 children, both under 10, both feral, are chasing each other with sticks that are technically also your fence. You sigh. It's fine. The sticks were never doing much fence work anyway. Breakfast is a single slice of yesterday's barley bread, which tastes faintly of ash and entirely of hardship. You gnaw on it carefully, avoiding the part that seems to contain a beetle wing. You're not mad about it. Protein's protein. Then comes the walk. Your field is nearly a half-mile from your hut, along a winding, uneven trail that hugs the Nile like a lazy snake. The path is dotted with carts, donkeys, farmers, and barefoot children, all trudging in the same direction. The early light glints off the river in that soft gold way that almost tricks you into thinking this is beautiful. And in a way it is. The Nile is everything: giver of life, carrier of silt, ruler of calendars, divider of rich and poor. You've learned its moods like you've learned your own hands. When it floods too high, it drowns. When it doesn't flood enough, it starves. When it's just right, the Pharaoh eats, the priests smile, and you get to live. But even when it's good, it's not good for you, because the Pharaoh's grain quota doesn't shrink when the flood shrinks. It stays exactly the same, which means your field needs to work twice as hard. And so do you. At the edge of your plot, you meet your cousin Hori. He's been waiting with your shared donkey, who is somehow both ancient and petty. The donkey has eaten part of your grain sack overnight. Again. You sigh. Hori shrugs. Better the sack than our fingers. You both laugh a little too hard at that. The day begins again. Bend, slice, bind, lift. Your sickle blisters are now layered with sickle calluses. Your muscles have moved beyond soreness into something resembling grim resignation. You lose track of time. The sun rises. The fields hum with movement. Someone starts singing a harvest chant, off-key but hopeful. Halfway through the day, you take a break and sit under the only acacia tree in view. It provides just enough shade for your elbows and nothing else. Hori offers you a handful of roasted lupin beans. They're bitter. They're dry. They're exactly what you needed. "Think we'll make quota?" he asks, his tone casual. You glance at the piles, not even close. "We always do," you lie. He nods. "And if we don't?" "Then the gods must have blinked." You both fall into silence. The unspoken truth. If you miss your numbers, the tax scribes don't adjust the scroll. They just adjust your rations, or your reputation, or your family's access to next season's seed stores. The Pharaoh doesn't starve. You do. That evening you limp home with your basket half full and your spirits half lower. Your youngest greets you with a broken clay doll and a demand for more bread. You hand her a kiss and a beetle-free corner of what's left in your pouch. Close enough. Dinner is stew, more water than lentil, flavoured with dried herbs and desperation. But it's warm, and it fills the space between your ribs just enough to let sleep sneak in later. As darkness falls, you step outside to rinse your hands in a small pot of Nile water. It's cloudy, a little slimy. You wash anyway. Overhead, the stars are coming out. Orion glitters near the horizon. The priests call that constellation the god Sar. They say he watches over the dead. You wonder if he watches the living too. You wipe your hands on your tunic, exhale into the night, and glance toward the river. The Nile murmurs back. Not in words, just a quiet, eternal reminder. You harvest for Pharaoh. Pharaoh harvests for the gods. And the gods! They never miss a meal. The Nile is quiet in the morning, still glassy, pretending to be innocent. But you know better. You know it's watching. And more importantly, you know they are watching. The tax collectors. You spot them as soon as you step into the fields. They're never subtle. A pair of officials dressed in pale linen that somehow stays clean even when they walk through mud. One holds a tally stick. The other carries a papyrus scroll tucked under his arm like a blade. And yes, behind them, lumbering and bored, is the temple ox cart, ready to collect your best bundles. You feel it in your stomach, the slow coiling of anxiety. Because today isn't just a work day, it's a counting day, and counting days never favour the counted. You and Hori exchange glances. Didn't know it was today, he mutters. Of course you didn't, you say. They never announced the guillotine either. He snorts, but his shoulders tighten. You both move faster. The bundles aren't tied as neatly. The stacks aren't placed as precisely. You're trying to make the field look fuller, the work look further along. You're not cheating, you're adjusting. The way the sun adjusts its heat, or how Pharaoh's agents adjust your reported yield after a bad flood year. As the collectors approach, the talk in the field dies. No more chanting, no laughter, just the dry hiss of stalks being cut and the occasional squawk of a frustrated donkey. The lead collector, a man with a nose like a hawk and the eyes to match, stops at the edge of your row. Name, he says, not looking at you. You answer. So does Hori. He makes a mark on his tally stick. Quotas unchanged. Temple tithes due today. State share to be weighed at sunset. He says it the way someone might announce the weather, or an eclipse. Then he starts measuring. Each bundle you place on the weighing stone gets scrutinized. Too light, it's tossed aside. Too stock heavy, it's sneered at. One bundle, damp with dew, is flagged as underweight due to moisture. You're charged anyway. You clench your teeth. Not because it's unfair, that ship sailed ages ago, but because there's nothing you can do. Historians still debate whether these quotas were truly standardized, or if local officials massaged them in favor of Pharaoh's prestige. But from where you're standing, it feels a lot like extortion with extra eyeliner. The second collector, the one with the scroll, nods each time his partner inspects a bundle. His brush strokes are quick, efficient. Your life is being recorded in a series of lines and dots, ink and power. They move down the field like a creeping tide, leaving behind a trail of numbers and dread. When they finally pass, Hori lets out a long breath. Could have been worse, he says. How? They could have asked about the missing corner of the field. Ah, yes, that. You both glance toward the western edge, where the river's most recent flood took a generous bite out of your plot. A whole row of young grain lost to waterlogged soil and shifting banks. You tried to disguise it by planting reeds and stacking your tools in front. The collectors didn't look closely, or maybe they did. You won't know until the final tally. You work through the day like you're digging yourself out of a hole you didn't make. The sun climbs, the blisters on your hands deepen. By late afternoon your shirt is soaked through and your knees feel like chewed wood. And then, as you're hauling a final bundle to the stack, you hear the low clatter of hoofbeats on stone. You freeze. It's a temple scribe, elevated, perfumed, riding a donkey that looks better fed than your children. He carries a rolled scroll and a bronze stamp. His presence means one thing: verification. Temple quotas are sacred. The priesthood claims their grain allotments based on what the gods require to maintain balance and fertility. You learned long ago not to ask how the gods came up with those numbers. You just give them what they want, or risk a drought being blamed on you. The scribe dismounts with a groan and walks straight to your bundle pile. He doesn't greet you, doesn't ask, just starts inspecting. He lifts a sheaf, pulls it apart, sniffs it, as if he's hoping to catch a whiff of heresy. One stalk is bent at an odd angle. He frowns. Careless, he mutters. Then he drops it. No adjustment, no mercy. You watch, silent, as he moves to the next farm. Hori lets out a low whistle. Temples touchy this year? They're always touchy, you reply. It's their favourite pose. That night, you walk home with fewer bundles than expected, more deductions than you deserve, and a deeply bitter taste in your mouth. Dinner is barley porridge. Again. Your wife adds a hint of garlic. You add a silent prayer to the Nile. Your daughter shows you her drawing, scratched into a tablet of mud with a stick. It's a family, smiling, holding loaves of bread the size of oxen. You smile back, even though your real bread would struggle to feed a lizard. As night falls, you sit outside with your knees pulled to your chest, staring at the water. The Nile shimmers in the starlight, pretending to be peaceful. But you know what it really is. A calendar, a judge, a scale that never tips in your favour. And tomorrow you'll rise again, sickle in hand, hope in short supply, because Pharaoh doesn't care if you're tired, only if your quota is. The Nile has a sense of humour. You learn this when the morning sky, which yesterday was clear as polished obsidian, today hangs low and grey, like it's thinking about crying but can't quite commit. You squint toward the horizon where the palm trees blur in the haze, and your gut twists. It's too early for another rise, too late for repairs. But the river doesn't run on your schedule, and neither does your overseer. He's already in the field when you arrive, pacing with his arms behind his back like a man rehearsing bad news. Which he is. He stops near your row and jabs a thumb toward the riverbank. Flood markers moved last night, he says. The water crept 4 hand lengths into the storage pit. Your brain doesn't process that right away. Then it hits. The storage pit. That's where you keep the bundles you've already harvested, where your last 2 days of blistered labour sit, wrapped in reed mats and stacked with what little ceremony your aching back could manage. You sprint. The pit isn't deep. Just a depression lined with stone and packed silt. But the bottom 3 layers of grain bundles, wet, the kind of wet that attracts mildew, mould and insects with complicated political systems. You touch one of the bundles and it squishes. A nearby worker sighs audibly. Offer it to the temple, he says. They'll say the gods prefer it pre-soaked. You laugh, but it's the kind of laugh that lives dangerously close to crying. You drag out what you can. The top layers are salvageable. The rest? Well, you could try drying them out, but that risks spores. If a tax inspector sees any sign of rot, you'll lose the full weight. Maybe more. The Nile giveth, and the Nile soggeth. You spend most of the morning hauling soggy sheaves into the sun. You lay them on woven mats, turn them like fish on a grill, and hope the heat pulls out enough moisture to avoid rejection. Your arms sting from the repeated motion. Your nose itches from the musty scent. You're going to be sneezing dried grain for the rest of the month. By midday, your cousin Hori arrives with news. Another farmer's storehouse, farther upriver, collapsed. The water rose overnight without warning, and a corner of the embankment gave way. Half his harvest? Gone. He's offering his ox to the temple in exchange for forgiveness, Hori says. You blink. That'll only work if the priest likes stew. It's stew or exile, he shrugs. Historians still argue whether Nile flood levels were fully predictable using ancient methods like measuring wells or observing Sirius. But ask any farmer and they'll tell you, the Nile lies, and when it lies, someone pays. You check your bundles again. The sun's doing its job, mostly. But there's no hiding the damp straw smell. You stack them anyway, wrapping the bottom ones in dry reeds and hoping no one smells too closely. That afternoon, the scribes return. They're here for mid-season estimates, which is like getting graded on a test while still taking it. The one with the hawk nose has been replaced by a new official, thinner, meaner, and wearing a pendant shaped like the goddess Maat. Balance, truth, order. You don't feel balanced. The scribe inspects your stack. He reaches for one of the bottom bundles, the wettest one, and you wince. He pauses, then he smiles. Dry enough, he says. You don't exhale. You collapse. He marks your name, nods, and moves on. You stare at the stack like it's a miracle. Like maybe, just maybe, today turned out okay. Then Hori nudges you. Don't celebrate yet. They're measuring canal wear tomorrow. You groan. Canal wear refers to erosion, and debris from your stretch of the irrigation system. It's your job to maintain it, even though you didn't dig it, even though half the damage was from your neighbour's cow. If it's under your plot, it's your problem. You add it to the list, along with everything else you're responsible for and nothing you control. That night the wind picks up. It carries the scent of distant rain, of mud that hasn't even been born yet. You lie awake listening to frogs shout into the darkness, your muscles too sore for sleep, your mind too loud for rest. Your wife turns toward you, whispers, "How much more?" You don't ask what she means, you just answer. Enough. It's the kind of answer you've learned to give. Vague, soft, the sound of a hope, with all the sharp edges sanded off. You're thinking about the scribe's smile, not a real one, not kind, just polite. A smile that says, "We'll let this pass. This time." You stare at the ceiling, watching a beetle navigate the thatch, and imagine what it would feel like to wake up one morning and not owe the gods, the Pharaoh, the weather, and a donkey who kicks more than he walks. But that's not this life. This life is early mornings, late sun, sticky clay, sore wrists, quiet winds, and a river that never ever forgets your shortcuts. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you'll wake up and do it again. Because you must. Because the Pharaoh expects it. Because the Nile doesn't care. You don't wake up so much as unstick yourself from sleep. Your arms are stiff, your mouth dry, and your shoulders ache like you wrestled a hippo in your dreams, and probably lost. The sky outside is still dim, painted in that pre-dawn blue that makes everything feel quiet but not peaceful. There's a weight in your bones that says today's going to hurt. You eat standing up. The bread is stale, cracked at the edges, and the water is lukewarm even though the jug was sealed overnight. Your daughter is still asleep, curled around a reed doll missing half its body. Your wife's already at the grindstone, turning grain into flour with the steady rhythm of someone who no longer notices she's doing it. You grab your sickle, time to return to the fields. Today is the cutting day. No weighing, no tallying, no scribes peering over your shoulder like birds waiting for you to drop something. Just labour. The kind that turns sweat into mud and spines into question marks. You find your place beside Hori. He's already working, sickle swinging in that practiced arc that comes from 1,000 days just like this. He nods at you, doesn't speak. That's how you know it's going to be a long one. You fall into rhythm, grab the stalks low, pull tight, slice with the sickle, gather, bind, stack, move, grab, slice, stack, move, repeat. The sun climbs fast today. There's no breeze, no clouds, no shade. You tie a strip of cloth around your forehead to keep the sweat out of your eyes, but it's soaked through before the hour turns. The rows seem longer today, or maybe you're just slower. You start counting bundles in your head, using them to mark time. 10 bundles before you pause, another 10 before you drink, another 10 before you dare look at the sun's position. Your muscles stop sending sharp pain. Instead, they switch to something duller, deeper, like they're just tired of complaining. Around midday, someone drops their sickle. It hits the ground with a sharp thunk, and everyone within earshot flinches. The overseer's head snaps up like a hawk spotting a mouse. He walks over, staff tapping with each step. It's a young man, barely a man really, just out of apprenticeship. His hands are red, blistered, shaking, his eyes brim with tears he's too proud to let fall. The overseer inspects his row. It's only half complete. Too slow, the overseer says. Then, without raising his voice, he adds, "Again, and you'll be reassigned to dung paddies." The boy nods, picks up the sickle, keeps going. No one says a word. You turn back to your own row. Grab, slice, stack, move. Later, during your water break, you and Hori sit beneath the shade of a wagon wheel leaned against a palm. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. Hori unwraps a bundle of dried fish and passes you one. It's chewy, salty, tastes like it was cured in regret. "You remember when we used to help our fathers during harvest?" he asks between bites. You nod. "Barely. I just remember getting yelled at for falling asleep on the bundles." He chuckles. "Now I dream about falling asleep on bundles." You both laugh, but it doesn't last. "Do you think," he says, voice low, "we'll be doing this forever?" You look out at the rows. Endless. Stalks as far as the eye can see. Yes, it's not cruel. It's just honest. By afternoon, the field smells different, warmer, sharper. The stalks are drier now, snapping more than slicing. A wind picks up, stirring the dust, sending flecks of chaff into your eyes, your nose, your shirt. You sneeze 3 times in a row and seriously consider if that's enough to take a break. It's not. A nearby cart collapses under its own weight. One of the axles splits, and the bundles scatter like spilled secrets. The workers groan. Someone kicks the wheel. The overseer makes a note. The sun begins its descent finally. The heat doesn't ease, but the shadows return. You feel a small relief when your fingers stop shaking. Not because you're better, because they're too tired to shake anymore. You finish your final row with your hands cramping. The sickle's grip has carved into your skin. You step back, admire the neat line of harvested bundles, and for just a second, you allow yourself the luxury of pride. Then you remember these aren't yours, they're Pharaoh's. At home, you collapse into your usual seat, really just a dent in the wall beside the door, and take off your sandals. Your toes are unrecognizable. Dust, blood, a blister that looks like it's thinking about having children. Your wife hands you a bowl of lentil mash. It's hot, thick, a little smoky. You swear it's the best thing you've ever tasted. Your son climbs onto your lap and asks, "Did you see the gods today?" You shake your head. "They were busy," he nods, satisfied. "Probably helping the river." You smile. But later, when everyone's asleep, you sit outside with your back against the mud brick wall and your feet buried in the cool dirt. You stare up at the stars. You know the gods aren't helping the river helps the gods, and the rest of you just cut, grab, slice, stack, move, every day, until the river judges you finished. The next morning, the overseer arrives before the sun does. You hear the ox cart long before you see it. The familiar thud-thud of hooves on hardened mud, the sharp creak of worn wooden wheels, the rhythmic tap-tap of the overseer's staff against the cart frame. You and Hori are just tying on your sandals when the shadow falls over your rows. "Inspection," he announces, in that too calm voice that always means trouble. Anyone behind quota will be motivated accordingly. He doesn't need to clarify what motivated means. Everyone here's seen it. Your back tightens. He steps off the cart. His robes are cleaner than usual, the linen stiff, sun-bleached. He's carrying 2 things, a bronze tablet and a cane made of palm wood, worn smooth from years of use. It's more than a walking stick, it's a symbol. Authority you can feel, authority that stings. He walks slowly down the rows, stopping every few paces to measure the harvest bundles. His assistant scribbles inky marks onto the bronze, scratching so hard you can hear it. Then he stops at your plot. You inhale quietly, hands clenched behind your back. Hori glances at you from the corner of his eye, but neither of you speak. This is a game, and you know the rules. Silence is safer than defense. The overseer kneels, pulls apart one of your bundles and inspects the stalks. His brow furrows. He weighs it in his hand. Then, too slowly, he drops it. "Light," he says. "You're cutting high." Your gut twists. You knew you were cutting low. You made sure. You even nicked your knuckles on the soil line yesterday trying to be thorough. This is a game, and the rules are, the overseer is always right. Still, your mouth opens. Thwack. The cane hits the bundle beside your foot, hard enough to send bits of grain flying. You flinch, but don't move. "Excuses take time," he says. "Time steals from Pharaoh." He moves on. Hori leans in later after the overseer disappears down the row. "You okay?" You nod slowly. "He's looking for a scapegoat," Hori grunts. "He always is. Better it be us than someone with goats." You almost laugh. Almost. The rest of the day moves slowly. You're shaken. Not from fear, no, you're used to that, but from the realization that even when you do it right, it can still be wrong. Because this system isn't built for your success, it's built for your compliance. Midday brings heat. The kind that presses against your skin like a wet plank of wood. You keep working, cut, bind, stack, lift. Over and over. Your hands are swollen, fingers stiff. You're down to your last strip of clean cloth, and even it smells like old onions and sunburn. By late afternoon, the overseer returns. Of course he does, but this time, He's not alone. He's brought the junior enforcer, a boy barely older than your son but already built like a pillar. He carries a longer staff and wears a sour expression that says he's trying very hard not to care. This is the punishment round. They're targeting the man 2 rows over. Nikem, older, slower, half lame from a hip injury 2 seasons ago. His pile is thinner than it should be. No one argues. The overseer mutters something to the enforcer. A minute later, Nikem is on his knees trying to explain. Rain washed part of the row. I've done double rows every day since... Crack. The enforcer's staff comes down on the back of Nikem's shoulder. Not hard enough to break, just hard enough to bruise, to remind. You stand still, eyes low, lips pressed thin. Nikem doesn't scream. He just picks up his sickle and keeps going. Historians still argue whether such punishments were regulated or improvised, whether scribes recorded them or turned their styluses the other way. But if you ask a farmer, they'll tell you justice in Pharaoh's land is measured in visible obedience. That evening, as you walk home, you pass the temple walls, high, smooth, painted with sacred glyphs. A priest stands at the gate, muttering a hymn to the sunset. You catch only a phrase, "May Matt bring balance to the scales." You almost snort. Balance? You've been holding up your end since you were old enough to grip a sickle. The scales are fine, as long as no one checks what's under the table. You reach your hut and fall onto the mat. Your daughter tugs at your sleeve and holds up a little bowl of dates. Special, she says. You eat one. It's sweet. Warm from her hand, you smile. It's the first soft thing you've tasted in weeks. Later, your wife rubs your shoulders. You don't speak. Just listen to the sound of water sloshing in a nearby jug and the soft breath of your sleeping children. And the pain in your back, it fades. Not because it's gone, because it's ordinary. Part of you now, a reminder that you're still here, still cutting, still stacking, still surviving, even under the watch of a man with a staff and a ledger, even in the land where truth is measured in bundles and bruises. You wake with something in your eye. It takes a few seconds to figure out what it is. Sand. Of course, there's always sand. In your eyes, your ears, between your teeth, and somehow, despite layers of cloth in places sand has no right to be. You blink, rub at your face, and sit up. The mat under you is more straw than cushion now, and the corner where your daughter sleeps smells faintly of last night's stew. She kicks in her sleep, mumbling about cows. You envy her. Her small body still soft, her fingers not yet twisted into sickle grip. You step outside. It's barely dawn, and the wind is already stirring. You sigh. It's going to be a dust day. Dust days are what happens when the wind decides to sweep across the fields like a broom made of tiny razors. You wrap a scarf around your head, pull it tight over your mouth and trudge to the field. Every footstep sends up a puff of grit. Your sandals squeak in protest. Hori's already there. He gives you a dry look, literally and emotionally. "Wind woke me up," he mutters, pulling a strand of straw from his tunic. "It had opinions about where I keep my ears." You nod, already wiping your eyes. It's not even proper wind yet, just the preamble. By the time the sun clears the horizon, the real storm begins. Sand moves in sheets, swirling low over the rows like smoke from a jealous god. It gets into your bundles, hides in the cut stalks, grinds between your teeth like angry salt. You squint, spit, wipe, repeat. There's no fighting it. You just endure. By midday, the sweat on your arms has turned to mud. Your fingernails feel gritty. Even your thoughts have texture. And then, because today hasn't been cursed enough, bees. Yes, bees. Not many. Just 3, maybe 4, zipping in a chaotic dance near your stack of dried grain. You swat at them gently, trying not to provoke, but one lands squarely on your neck as bold as a tax scribe. You freeze. It pauses, then decides you're not nectar. Lucky. You glance at Hori, who's chuckling through his scarf. "They know better," he says. "What? Sting a farmer and they're dead by morning. We can't afford to itch and feed the gods." During the break, you sit behind a broken cart for shelter. You pull out your water pouch, lukewarm again, and sip. It tastes faintly like goat skin and hope. Your wife put in a pinch of mint today. You could cry. "You think bees are sacred?" Hori asks suddenly. You shrug. "Depends who you ask. Temple says they're born from the tears of Ra, he muses, chewing a piece of flatbread so hard it cracks. But mine live in a pot near my latrine. Maybe Ra has a sense of humour, you say. Historians still debate whether bees were truly revered across all social classes in ancient Egypt, or just among the priestly elite. But one thing's for sure, nobody likes a bee in the face while hauling grain. Later, as you return to cutting, the sand seems to rise higher. It's in your hair, your ears, your undertunic. You can't see the river anymore, just a soft brown wall, rippling like a curtain. Someone nearby drops a basket. The grain spills. In the wind, it scatters almost immediately like the river itself is hungry. The worker, young, maybe 15, falls to their knees, trying to gather it back up. The overseer doesn't even look, just makes a mark on his tally stick. That grain is counted. Gone. You feel a tightness in your chest. Not anger, just that familiar weight, the one that settles in when you realise the gods might not be watching today. As you stack your final bundle, you notice the twine is fraying. You reach into your pouch, find the last piece of reed cord and tie it carefully. Your fingers are numb, your eyes sting. You've done enough. For today. You and Hori walk home together, heads low against the wind. You're both covered in dust, grit, and the kind of exhaustion that makes words optional. Back at your hut, you wash your face with a damp rag. It turns the water black. You peel off your tunic and shake it out. Enough sand falls to build a second house. Your wife sets out a bowl of garlic and lentils. The smell is strong, comforting. You chew slowly, eyes half closed. I gave the bees their pot back, she says softly. You nod. Smart. Your daughter shows you her new game, trapping tiny frogs in a basket and pretending they're gods. She chants something made up, completely wrong and entirely adorable. You kiss her forehead. Later, as you lie in the dark, you can still feel the sand in your ears. You wonder if, in the temples, the priests deal with this. If Pharaoh ever gets sand in his breakfast. If the gods ever notice when a farmer loses a bundle to the wind. Probably not. But you notice, and that's enough to try again tomorrow. Even if it means more sand, more bees, more days where the only miracle is a bundle that stays tied. The cows are staring at you again. Not in a cute way. In a judgmental, we know you forgot the feeding order kind of way. They blink slowly as you approach the pen, tails swishing, hooves shuffling in the dust. The oldest one, nicknamed Bent Horn because of a very unfortunate encounter with a storage jar, lets out a low, grumpy murr. You sigh. The cows are part of your life, your labour and your liability. They're essential to your work and your standing, but they're also under watch, divine watch. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, even livestock belongs, spiritually speaking, to the gods. Your first task of the day isn't cutting or bundling, it's checking brands. Each cow must be inspected for markings, family seals, temple stamps and age rings cut into the ear folds. You kneel beside Bent Horn and run your fingers along the faint image scorched into her hide, a stylized eye, half faded. It's the temple mark of Hathor, goddess of fertility, women, and, inconveniently, cattle. The branding is decades old, but it still counts. These cows are on loan. Technically, they're temple property. If one gets sick, you owe a fee. If one dies, you might owe a goat. If one goes missing, well, don't. Your youngest calf, a spotted little miracle named Seshi, seems to be doing better. She had a fever last week. You rubbed her down with a poultice of garlic, fig bark and crushed beetles, recommended by a temple healer who might have been guessing. She's up today, wobbling but walking. That's a win. You mark it on your cattle tablet, a small clay slab you keep tucked in a pouch on your belt. The clay's cracked, the writing's cramped, but it's yours. It holds the names, ages and ailments of every animal under your care. A herd on a tablet, a life in lines. After the cows are fed, watered and properly guilt-tripped into surviving another day, you head to the fields. There's a scribe waiting. Of course there is. He's young, smug, and dressed in linen that practically glows. He's holding a reed pen and a roll of fresh papyrus. That's a bad sign. Papyrus is expensive. They don't waste it unless they're preparing an official notice. You approach, cautious. "Good morning," you say. He doesn't respond, just unrolls the scroll and begins reading. In accordance with the Temple of Ptah, we're conducting a verification of all cattle under tithing status. Non-compliance will result in property seizure or labour reassignment. You blink. Verification of cattle, he says without looking up. You're tempted to say, they're right there, mooing in your direction. But instead you nod and lead him to the pen. He walks the perimeter slowly, muttering as he compares your animals to a master list. You watch, stomach tightening, stomach. Because if even one animal is unaccounted for, or worse, mismarked, you could lose more than just a cow. You could lose Face, and in your village, Face feeds families. Where's the black one, he asks. You frown. Black one. He taps the scroll. Cow, 5 on 12B, described as dark-coated, female, calf-bearing. Oh, you know that one. She died last season. Fever, bloating, collapsed in the pen overnight. You carved her death onto the cattle tablet, but you didn't tell the temple. You take a breath. She passed, mid-flood season. I can show the record. The scribe eyes you. Was a replacement submitted? No, you admit. We didn't have the yield to trade this year. He scribbles something. You feel the cold steel of tension slide down your back. It's not a fine, yet, but it could be. You might be called to the temple, might have to offer a bribe, or worse, lose a healthy calf as retroactive compensation. The scribe nods curtly. Expect reassessment within the moon cycle. Then, and just like that, he leaves. You sit down beside Bent Horn. She chews something that might have been a sandal in a past life. They really want the dead ones to report in, you mutter. Hori finds you like that, head in your hands, muttering to a cow. Rough morning, he asks. Temple's counting ghosts, you say. Then tell them to count their own. He hands you a dried fig. It's half squished and full of seeds, but it tastes like something close to joy. That evening you review your cattle tablet by firelight. Each line tells a story. One calf was born during a sandstorm. One cow went blind and learned to follow the others by smell. One bull escaped for 3 days and came back coated in river mud and what you hope was lotus pollen. These animals aren't just beasts of burden, they're your memory, and the temple wants them to be numbers. But you won't let them forget the names. You run your fingers over the clay. Bent Horn, Seshi, Manu, Little Reed. One of them farts loudly. You sigh. Even memories have digestion. You smile, just a little, then tuck the tablet away. Because in this world, even the cows need protection, especially when they belong to gods. You hear it before you see it, a voice echoing across the fields, rhythmic sing-song, just a little too theatrical for this early in the day. The stars have spoken. The time has come. Oh no, it's the astronomer priest. You turn to see him approaching like a storm dressed in white linen. His arms are raised. His staff is tipped with gold leaf. His expression is somewhere between reverent and smug. The harvest shall be adjusted, he declares, as foretold by the great star of Isis. Hori mutters beside you, great, another celestial update. You don't laugh. Not because it isn't funny, but because these updates tend to mean recalculated quotas, recalibrated rituals, and someone very mortal getting blamed for something very astronomical. The priest arrives at the centre of the field, dramatically lifting a small polished stone disc, his sky reader, though you're pretty sure it's just decorative pottery. He speaks to the gathered workers. The star Sirius has risen above the eastern horizon before dawn. The Nile's breath shifts. We must act. Here it comes. We're advancing the final collection cycle by 4 days. Gasps ripple. Whispers too. You and Hori exchange glances. 4 days early? You're behind as it is. Advancing the quota means fewer hours, more bundles, and very likely mistakes. You raise your hand. But the river's still falling. The grain's still soft in the north plots. The priest doesn't even blink. The gods are unconcerned with softness. He gestures skyward. The calendar obeys the heavens. You obey the calendar. Which is, of course, very convenient for someone who doesn't actually have to carry a bundle of wet wheat across 3 acres of mud. Back at your plot, you go through your baskets. You've been drying grain all week, hoping for an extra day or two of sun. Now, you'll have to rush it. Push the damp bundles through inspection, and pray the scribes don't notice the mildew smell. This is going to ruin the tally, Hori says. Historians still argue whether priests actually track Sirius with accuracy, you mutter. Or if they just liked adjusting the calendar when it suited them. He chuckles. Must be nice to blame the stars. You try to calculate what you'll need to finish on time. 2 extra rows a day, fewer breaks, less sleep. No wind, no rain, no animal-related catastrophes. So, naturally, a donkey bites a scribe. You're halfway through stacking when you hear the yelp. You turn in time to see a junior scribe waving his arms, hopping in circles, his tunic dark with dirt, his scroll bent. The donkey, unimpressed, returns to chewing a rope. There's a flurry of yelling. The overseer runs in. The scribe limps away. The donkey snorts like it's very proud of itself. Hori leans on his staff, grinning. Even the animals are mad about the deadline. You skip your mid-meal to make up time. The sun burns your shoulders. The field smells like hot hay and wet sweat. You keep working, keep cutting. Your wrists go numb. Your fingers are shaking. But the pile grows, a little. By sunset, your hands are blistered. The skin along your palms has started to peel. You chew a handful of lentils, drink a cup of gritty water, and sit under a tree that has never, in recorded history, provided shade for more than one person. You hear a voice behind you. It's the astronomer priest again. Great. He's not speaking to you directly. He's talking to a group of young workers near the central path. But his voice carries. Do not question the stars. They reveal what is hidden. They know when grain is ready and when men are lazy. That last part is a very earthly jab. You roll your eyes. He continues. Sirius rises and the Nile swells. The gods demand swiftness. Except the Nile isn't swelling. It's shrinking slowly like it always does this time of year. You've watched it, measured it with your own eyes, your own feet. The star didn't change the river, but the star did change your deadline. That night you sit beside your wife, sharing a piece of bread that tastes mostly like charcoal. She tells you the neighbour's boy got in trouble for stealing a bundle of reeds from the temple pool. He said the gods weren't using them, you snort. Smart kid, she raises an eyebrow. He got whipped. Still smart, just unlucky. You don't talk about the star or the deadline or the fact that tomorrow you'll have to harvest twice your usual and hope no one checks the moisture content too closely. Instead, you lie down. Close your eyes, listen to the frogs. You remember when the stars used to feel magical, back when you were small, and the constellations were stories, not tools for squeezing more sweat from your back. Now they're just management. Cosmic middlemen with no accountability. You drift off wondering if there's a star for survives despite everything. If there is, you'd like it carved on your tablet someday, right next to your name. By morning the fields feel heavier, not in a dramatic end-of-days kind of way, just in that quiet, soggy sandal sort of way. The dew clings longer than usual. The bundles you left out to dry feel damp to the touch again. The wind has shifted, and now the scribes have arrived. You spot them marching in from the east, 3 in total, 1 leading, 1 recording, and 1 holding what appears to be a portable balance scale like it's the Eye of Ra itself. Their robes are so white they look like they've never met dirt. Their sandals untouched by mud, which is suspicious because everything here is muddy. You've heard about this trio before. They're called the Clean Weights, not because their math is perfect, but because their ledgers are known to be sharp and unforgiving. The lead scribe stops at the centre of the field and claps twice. Everyone freezes. It is time, he declares, for harvest verification. Oh no. Verification day means every farmer must bring a selection of bundles to the weighing area, present them for inspection, and accept whatever numbers the scribes decide to carve into clay. There is no appeal, no second opinion, only quiet humiliation or quiet relief. You glance at your stack. You did your best. You know that. But the bundles are still damp around the edges thanks to yesterday's fake serious deadline. The tips of the grain stalks are curling, a little softer than ideal. You breathe out slowly. Hori mutters beside you. They'll probably declare us fraudulent and then bill us for the fraud. That's not a joke, you say. I know, he says. You carry your bundles forward, balanced on your shoulder, wrists throbbing with each step. The scribes wave you to your spot, square number 12, marked in the dust with a clay tile. You kneel, set the bundles down gently, and wait. The second scribe begins the weighing. He picks up a bundle, places it on the balance scale, and starts moving clay counterweights around like a child playing with puzzle pieces. Except this game determines whether your family eats next month. The weight is recorded. Then comes the third scribe. His job is measuring grain density. Yes, really. He uses a small reed scoop to dig into your bundle and withdraw a sample. He pours it into a small bowl, runs his fingers through it, squints and declares, "Moist. Lower value." Of course it is. You want to say, "It rained. The river rose. The priest moved the deadline," but instead, you nod. The lead scribe marks the final tally into his clay tablet. The stylus cuts into the wet surface with neat, brutal certainty. You wait. He looks up. Your field is currently assessed at 76.4% of expected yield. That's too low. Too low to meet your quota. Too low to avoid reassessment. Too low to stay off the list. You feel the weight settle in your stomach like a stone. Behind you, another farmer tries to argue. His voice rises. "I gave more than last year. I planted extra rows," and is met with silence. The scribe simply replies, "Then last year was too little." You carry your empty basket back to your row. The weight in your legs has nothing to do with grain. Hori joins you minutes later. He looks worse. "They said I only gave 63%. Told me I was likely to be restructured." That's the temple's favourite new word for redistributed. Sometimes it means more labour. Sometimes it means fewer rations. Sometimes it means your field is given to someone else, and you end up hauling stones for a canal no one wants. He sits beside you, jaw clenched. "I worked double. I know. I gave up the North Patch. I know. They don't care." You both sit in silence. That evening, after the fields are empty and the scribes have packed away their spotless sandals, you sit by the water, not too close, just near enough to hear the ripple and watch the moonlight stretch across the surface. You bring out your copy tablet, a small clay pad you hide in your belt pouch. It's not official, not part of the archive, just a quiet record of what really happened. You carve the truth. Cut early by priest's order, field damp, adjusted numbers, undervalued. You add today's date, your name, the bundle count you measured with your own hands. You press your thumb into the corner, a signature, small, faint, just in case someone ever wants to know what actually happened. You hear frogs, distant singing, a child crying somewhere in the village. Life goes on. The Nile doesn't stop for your bruised pride or your bent back. It keeps flowing, keeps remembering. You wonder if the gods read tablets like this, if they ever lean over temple walls and squint at scribbles made by farmers in the dark. You doubt it, but you keep writing anyway, because someday when someone finds this record buried in mud, maybe they'll know. You weren't lazy, you weren't weak, you were measured wrong. You're holding a spoon made of clay. You're using that spoon to stir a pot that may contain stew, or porridge, or something unclassifiable with the texture of regret. This is dinner. You're seated on the threshold of your home, where the air's marginally cooler, and the smoke from the cook fire drifts away instead of swirling into your eyes. Your daughter sits cross-legged beside you, humming to herself, and feeding pieces of dried fig to a frog she's named Little Happy. The frog is either deeply honoured or deeply confused. Your wife emerges from the back of the house with an armful of reeds. "Sand blew through the back again," she mutters. You nod. Of course it did. You've considered naming the wind. It visits so often, it's basically family. The only thing that keeps you upright these days, besides habit, is knowing you've almost made it to the end of the harvest. Just a few more days, a few more bundles, and then you can rest for maybe 6 hours. This morning's task is livestock maintenance, again. You've spent so much time shoveling donkey droppings and checking cattle hooves lately that you're starting to recognise their moods better than your own family's. Bent Horn is moody today. She swats her tail like she's trying to summon thunder. You assume it's because her feed has been stretched thinner this week. Temple tax siphoned off some of the stores. Meanwhile, Seshi the calf keeps trying to eat your sandals. Hori shows up with his 2 boys, both covered in dust and carrying baskets that look twice their size. "They wanted to help," he says. You raise an eyebrow. Define help. The older one drops a bundle of barley into the feeding trough and sneezes so hard he topples backward. The younger one gives a triumphant shout and starts counting donkeys. 10, he declares. There are 5. Double donkeys, he beams. You and Hori exchange that quiet, exhausted smile that all fathers eventually learn. The one that says they'll be fine as long as they keep thinking this is fun. As you finish tending to the animals, the village warden appears. That's never a good sign. She's a tall woman with a voice like a cracked jar and a staff carved with the symbol of Thoth, the god of records. She's not here for worship. She's here for updates. Your family count? She asks sharply. 4, you answer. 2 adults, 2 children, she nods. Your store count? You pause. 10 full baskets, 3 not yet sealed. Tool count? You list them. Sickle, shovel, water pot, yoke strap, fire basin. She makes a mark after each one on her status tablet. The scribe trailing her dips his reed pen and writes faster than seems physically possible. The warden squints at you. Any incidents? No, you say too quickly. I mean, no more than usual. She pauses. You've had a consistent bundle weight, but we noticed a slight decline in your household's labour radius. You blink. My... what? Your active field radius has shrunk. You stare at her. I broke my sandal and lost 2 days to animal care. She nods like she's heard this one before, probably because she has. Adjustments will be noted, she says, which means absolutely nothing good. She moves on. The scribe follows, still writing, still not looking up. You check your own shadow tablet later. Yes, you've been tracking it too, just not as dramatically. You've recorded hours worked, bundles stacked, days missed, meals skipped, rainfall, sun exposure. Even the weird dream you had last week about talking sheaves of barley. If the temple's version of events ever gets too creative, you'll at least have your own truth, even if no one wants to read it. Historians still argue whether commoners in ancient Egypt kept their own records or simply relied on oral tradition. But if you're any example, it's both. You don't trust memory alone, not when so many people are paid to remember on your behalf. That evening, your youngest presents you with a frog, not a pretend frog, a very real, very damp, very annoyed frog. She holds it up like a trophy. This one's for the gods, she says. You blink. Did they ask for it? No, but they'll like it. You consider correcting her. You don't. Instead, you help her build a tiny altar from a broken pot and a fig leaf. She places the frog gently on top. It hops off immediately. She sighs. Frogs don't pray, she mutters. Maybe they do in secret. She grins. Later, your wife brings out a small bowl of sweet beer, fermented with dates and dreams, and you sit together under the stars. The night air is cool. Your muscles ache. Your mouth tastes like barley and ash. But you're still here, still fed, still unwhipped. The Nile, for now, stays in its banks, and the frog, still watching from the edge of the mat like a tiny green priest. You raise your bowl in its direction. May the gods grant me even half that frog's luck. You drink and close your eyes. Tomorrow's another harvest day. But tonight, you let the frog keep watch. You've heard stories about the bread in the palace, fluffy, warm, golden. Bread that breaks softly between your fingers and smells like honey and spice. Bread that doesn't crumble into gravel or hide surprises that crunch when they shouldn't. You're not eating that bread. Your bread this morning was baked 2 days ago and spent last night absorbing the smoke from your neighbour's cook fire. It's hard, dry, a little sour in the middle. You chew slowly, carefully, like it might bite back. Because sometimes it does. You pick out something that may be a pebble, or a burnt lentil, or a gift from the millstone itself. You toss it aside and try not to think about it too long. You wash the rest down with warm water that tastes like reeds. Today, you return to the fields. Your arms are lead, your legs aching reeds, but you go anyway. Midway through your first row, you spot one of the granary clerks pacing the road. That's unusual. They don't normally leave their shadowy ledgers and cool storerooms. He's thin, bent slightly from years of hunching over scrolls, and carries a wax tablet under one arm and a long reed pen he keeps tapping against his knuckles. You watch him from a distance as he questions a few workers. They point. He nods. He's coming closer. You glance at your basket. You have nothing to hide. But that's never stopped suspicion before. Farmer, he says, stopping in front of you. Clerk, you reply. He squints at his wax tablet. You're listed as receiving 2 loaves per Labour Day under rations. But temple records show inconsistent collection, you frown. We collect every 5th day. It's what we were told. Not according to the scrolls, he raises an eyebrow. You've been shorted, your breath catches. Shorted? He nods. About 6 loaves based on your hours. That's a lot. That's half a week of food. A child's appetite, a worker's strength. And where did it go, you ask? He doesn't answer, which tells you everything. Someone's skimming, and it's not just you. You gather with a few others at the edge of the canal road after your shift. Hori, 2 elderly farmers, and a woman who runs the barley grinder. Everyone's heard a version of the same story. Loaves missing. Rations miscounted. Some workers dismissed for disruption when they asked too many questions. There's a pattern, Hori says. There's always a pattern, the barley woman replies, and it always ends with the temple saying the gods needed more bread. You stare down at your hands, grimy, stiff, flecked with chaff, and think about the brick-like loaf you chewed this morning. It had an odd flavour, not exactly spoiled, just wrong. The barley woman sees your face and nods. They've been adding more husk, she says, and stones. Stones. Ground so fine you don't see it, but chew long enough and you'll know. You do know. The aching molar on your right side has felt like it might betray you for days now. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian workers were fed well by state standards or poorly by modern ones. The records show rationed bread, dried fish, onions and beer, but those records were kept by the people distributing the food, not the ones eating it. And anyway, no scribe ever wrote, "Today's bread tastes like regret." That night you open your shadow tablet again. You add a line. Bread ration shorted, Clark confirmed. Husk increased, stones probable. Then you press a dot. A new kind of marker. One that you've started using for things that feel wrong in a different way. Not just tiring, not just painful, but off. You've started calling it the false weight dot. It marks the kind of imbalance no scribe admits, but every labourer feels. The next morning your wife hands you your bread with a sheepish look. "I tried a new grind," she says. You bite in. It crumbles differently. Softer, a little grainy still, but with less surprise. You smile. "It's good," she shrugs. "I used less husk, so it'll run out sooner. Still worth it." You eat the whole thing, slowly, carefully, gratefully. Later in the field, a young worker drops their bread in the mud and cries. You pick it up, dust it off, hand it back. They take it like it's gold, and in a way it is, because this isn't palace food, this is bread with corners, with flaws, with stories, and somehow it still keeps you standing. That night, after the chores and the dust and the distant temple chanting, you sit under the stars and whisper your thanks, not to the gods, to your molars, for hanging on, to your wife, for her grinding stone, to your stomach, for forgetting its hunger when it needs to. Because in this world, you don't pray for perfect bread. You pray for enough bread. And tonight, you have enough. You wake to music, not the joyful kind. No lyres or dancing girls, no clapping or palm drumming under date trees. No, this is processional music, which means temple parade incoming. You sit up, rubbing your eyes. The sound filters through the morning haze. Long horn notes, deep drum beats, a slow rhythmic clatter like polished stones being shaken in a jar. Your daughter's already out front, wide-eyed. "They're coming," she squeals. Of course they are. It's the Festival of Lamps, one of the mid-season temple celebrations. You forgot it was this week. That explains the extra chanting last night, and the sudden request yesterday for 2 baskets of gift grain from every household. Not a tax, they said, a divine offering. You'd like to see the difference written on papyrus. By the time you reach the road, the procession is already winding past the irrigation canal. There are priests in white singing in low, droning harmonies. Young temple boys throw petals, which promptly stick to the mud. 4 men carry a gilded bark on their shoulders, the kind you usually only see carved into tomb walls. Inside it, a small statue of a falcon-headed god wobbles slightly as they walk. You're not sure if it's Horus or Ra, or a particularly smug local deity, but it's wearing more gold than your entire family has ever owned. Behind them, the grain collectors. Of course, They're sweeping behind the celebration like a second wave of gods, dressed less grandly, but with heavier baskets. And they're not asking. The offerings are being taken. 2 bundles here, a sack there. One man tries to offer just a loaf instead of grain. He's told to accompany the priest to the temple, not as a guest. You back away. You don't need trouble. You already gave yesterday. But then a temple boy points at you. "Farmer, do you have your second bundle?" Your mouth opens, closes. You weren't told there'd be a second. You glance at Hori. He's frozen, loaf in one hand, daughter hiding behind his leg. You look at your own satchel. There's a small pouch of grain you were saving to trade for onions. You hand it over. The boy accepts it like it's blessed. The collectors nod. The bark moves on. You stand in silence. Chapter. "Second bundle?" Hori mutters as soon as they're out of earshot. "They invent numbers faster than they harvest," you say. He sighs. "I was going to give that to my brother. I was going to eat it." You both watch the procession disappear toward the temple. Later, back in the fields, the workers are buzzing. Some are angry, some confused. A few, weirdly, are excited. They say the Festival of Lamps will bring better yields next season, that the gods will favour those who gave freely, that the light in the procession will shine on your doorstep if your bundle was honest. You stare down at your fingers, still sticky with grain dust. You hope they're right, but you've been honest before, and the gods still took more. By late afternoon, the fields are quiet again. You and Hori finish your row, sweating under the last push of sunlight. The bundles are lighter, not because the grain is poor, because you're holding back, just enough, just in case, because when the gods come with drums and gold, they come hungry. Historians still argue whether festivals like this were genuine religious events or elaborate tax collection schemes with a holy soundtrack. But to you, standing barefoot in the mud, the result is the same. Less in your hands. That evening you return home to find your daughter lighting a clay lamp with a reed wick. "For the gods," she says brightly. You smile despite yourself. You strike the flint, help her light it. The tiny flame flickers in the draught. She cups her hands around it, proud. You watch it dance, fragile and gold, just like the one on the bark, except this one's yours. Yours to light, yours to protect. You sit with your wife and share a bowl of onion broth, thin, sharp, and surprisingly warm. You tell her about the second bundle, about the singing, about the falcon statue with its golden crown and bobbing smirk. She raises an eyebrow. You think they'll remember who gave? You shake your head. They'll remember who didn't. She nods. Later, as you lay down, you write one more line on your shadow tablet. Festival took 2 bundles. Unexpected. Called it devotion. Felt like theft. You don't press a false weight dot. You just leave it open-ended. Because maybe, the gods did see. Maybe they'll send rain early. Maybe your crops won't rot. Maybe your daughter's lamp will stay lit through the night. You lie on your mat, listening to the wind stir the reeds, and think, if the gods are watching, they should have seen how much that second bundle cost. You know something's wrong the moment you reach the pen. The donkey, your only beast of burden, the 4-hooved anchor of your entire harvest plan, is lying on its side. Breathing? Yes. Moving? No. You rush forward, kneel beside her. Her flanks rise and fall in slow, laboured rhythm. Her eyes flutter open, then close again. Her ears twitch feebly. You've seen this before. This is the not dead but close stage, and if you don't act soon, you'll be down not just an animal, but the traction, hauling power and ritual balance of your entire field. You call for Hori, who jogs over, already frowning. He kneels, presses his hands gently to the donkey's stomach, then lifts her lip to check her gums. Dehydrated, he says, and probably bloated. You sigh. She had less barley mash this week. We were saving some for tax weight. Yeah, Hori says quietly. That'll do it. You spend the next hour coaxing her upright. You dribble water into her mouth, rub her flank with warm cloths, mash soaked figs into a rough paste and smear it across her gums like you're both healer and lunatic. She lifts her head briefly, then flops back down. The temple healer arrives around midday. You had to trade 2 bundles of semi-dried grain to convince him to come, on foot. Apparently the temple's ox was busy blessing ceremonial carts, whatever that means. The healer prods, pokes, mutters something about bad omens, then pulls out a small pouch of sacred herbs. He burns some under the donkey's nose. She sneezes. Still has breath, he says. Is that a diagnosis? Close enough. He leaves behind a jar of something that smells like week-old beer and promises it'll rebalance her spirit. You try not to scream. That afternoon, word spreads through the village. Your donkey is sick. And in Egypt, in the season of harvest, a sick donkey is more than just bad luck. It's a sign that something's wrong with the flow, the divine energy, the balance between effort and yield. By evening, 3 different neighbours have stopped by to whisper suggestions. Bury a feather from a temple ibis near her hoof. Name her after a goddess. That might confuse the evil spirits. Rub onion juice on her tongue. Worked on my aunt's goat. Even your daughter gets involved. She makes a necklace of clay beads and hangs it around the donkey's neck. For good dreams, she says. The donkey doesn't protest. You try to sleep that night, but your mind spins. You've lost time, lost labour. If she doesn't improve by morning, you'll have to carry your bundles yourself, in baskets, on your back, twice as long, twice as painful. And if your field falls behind, you've seen what happens. Historians still argue whether donkeys in ancient Egypt were sacred or just indispensable. Some records show them honoured in funerary offerings. Others show them taxed like wheat and barley, valued only when useful. But to you? She's family, tired, grumpy, possibly cursed, but family. At dawn, you're at her side again. You stroke her nose. She opens one eye and, "Come on," you whisper. "We're not done yet." She shifts, then slowly, blessedly, she pushes herself upright. You don't cheer, don't speak. You just press your forehead to hers and breathe. You work slower that day. Every load takes longer. The donkey isn't strong yet, but she walks, follows, pulls a half-cart with her usual mix of stubbornness and squeaky effort. Hori walks beside you. "She's tougher than she looks," he says. "So are we," you reply. That evening, your wife gives you a bowl of stew that smells like cumin and something sweeter. She doesn't ask about the donkey. She doesn't need to. Instead, she sets down a fresh strip of linen, newly woven, tightly spun. "Bandage her hooves," she says. "Wrap the weak one." You nod. You take the cloth outside. The donkey blinks at you in the fading light. You wrap her hoof carefully, gently, like it matters. Because it does. Because she matters. Not to the scribes, not to the temple, but to you. And tonight, that's enough. Later, as the stars rise, you make a note on your shadow tablet. Donkey ill, lost half day, temple healer useless. Daughter's beads may have helped. You smile, then add a small sun symbol beside the line. That's your own code, your own private blessing. You've decided the sun means something survived. And today, so did you. You've never actually seen a real magician. You've heard of them, of course. Robed men with silver pendants, heads shaved clean, eyes lined in kohl so they always look like they haven't slept since the last eclipse. Supposedly, they whisper to crocodiles and summon rain with a cough. But in reality, the closest you've ever gotten to magic is the local herb woman, who once insisted your cousin's foot rash was caused by an evil stare from a donkey. Still, you're desperate. It's been 2 days since your donkey fell ill. She's standing now, eating slowly, but her gait is unsteady and her tail barely swishes. You're grateful she's alive. But grateful doesn't move bundles. So when the barley grinder's daughter whispers that a wandering amulet peddler is visiting the edge of the village, you go. You don't tell anyone. Not Hori, not your wife. You just go. You find him beneath a tamarisk tree, sitting on a woven mat surrounded by tiny clay bowls, dried herbs, feathers, and enough bone fragments to start a second pyramid. He looks up as you approach. His beard is patchy, his tunic stained, his sandals mismatched. A good sign. You trust a man who's too distracted for symmetry. "I need help," you say. He doesn't blink. He just gestures to the mat. You sit. He reaches into a pouch and pulls out a strip of leather, a few coloured beads, and a small metal disc stamped with the eye of Horus. "For balance," he says. "She's not balanced," you reply. "She stumbles, breathes like she's drowning." He nods. "You've given figs?" Yes. Prayers? Yes. Onion rub? Yes. Salt under the left hoof? No. He clucks his tongue and shakes his head like you've forgotten to light a sacred brazier. He ties the beads to the leather, folds it twice and hands it to you. Hang it from her ear. Whisper her name into it. 3 times. Before sunrise. And the salt? He hands you a tiny pouch. Only from near the river bend. Not just any salt. Riverborne. You give him a handful of dried lentils and one of your last good fish hooks. He accepts both solemnly. Good trade, he says. If she walks steady tomorrow, leave a bit of barley by the river. Just a pinch. That's thanks. You walk home holding the charm like it's a secret. And maybe it is. You wait until the stars are out before you hang it from her ear. Seshi, you whisper once. Seshi again. Seshi, a 3rd time. Her ear twitches. The beads catch a glint of moonlight. You press the salt gently into the dirt beside her hoof. Then you sit down in the hay and wait. In the morning you wake to find her standing and walking, still slow but steady. You grin like a child offered honey. You don't even question it. You just head straight to the river bend and scatter a pinch of barley onto the current. Later that day, you're back in the fields. You cut slower, more carefully. Your muscles complain less. The wind is gentle, carrying the scent of early lotus bloom. The air feels different. Hori notices too. You're humming, he says. I am not. You haven't hummed since we were 12, you shrug. Maybe I forgot how to stop. At midday, a messenger arrives from the village. He carries a notice scroll wrapped in cord and sealed with the Temple of Anubis. Now, that's odd. Anubis is for the dead, and funerals, and the quiet that follows. The scroll is addressed to your neighbour, an older man who rarely speaks. His donkey died last week. You helped dig the hole. The messenger delivers it, bows, and walks away. You don't ask what's in the scroll. You don't have to. You already know. The temple is collecting. They always do, even from the quiet. That night, you burn a sliver of fig bark by your doorway. It's not temple incense, but it smells clean, honest, like work and wood smoke and memory. Your daughter asks about the charm on the donkey's ear. Is it magic, you think? Then nod. It is now. She nods seriously and scampers off to make one of her own, for the frog. Your wife leans against the doorway, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Did it work? You shrug. She's walking. She was walking yesterday. Now she walks with a necklace. Your wife laughs, rare and lovely, and disappears inside. You scratch a final line into your shadow tablet. Herbs, salt, whisper, charm. Walking again. Some things don't need math. You stare at it a moment. Then, carefully, add a second sun mark. One for the donkey. One for the strange man with mismatched sandals. Because this world is hard and long and shaped by sweat. But sometimes it still gives back. Just a little. Just enough. Grain is sacred. You hear that phrase again today for the 100th time from the lips of the village elder, a leathery man with no teeth and too many opinions. He's crouched by the community well, watching the younger workers fill clay jugs, and as you pass he waves his gnarled staff. Remember, boys, he says, squinting into the sun, grain is sacred. The gods count every kernel. You smile politely, keep walking. Because here's what he doesn't say out loud. Your neighbours count every kernel too, and one of yours is missing. You noticed it this morning. Just one basket. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger a temple report. You keep your grain in the storage pit behind your hut, covered with a thick reed mat and wedged between 2 low stones. You check it every night. Last night, 22 bundles. This morning, 21. You know because you count every day. Quietly, like a habit, like a superstition. So someone took one. You ask Hori first. He scowls. Of course not. I'd rather eat sand than steal from you. You believe him. Mostly. You talk to your wife. She shakes her head. Our daughter played near the pit yesterday, but she can't even lift a bundle. You consider the dog, the donkey, a raccoon, if raccoons existed here, but no, it was lifted, clean, like someone who's done this before. That afternoon, during your break, you sit beside the irrigation canal and watch the reeds sway. Someone stole your grain, and you know exactly who it was. Menna, the neighbour 2 huts down, a wiry man with a nervous laugh and fingers too fast for honesty. He always looks over his shoulder, always gives too many compliments. You noticed the new scratch on his sandal. You noticed how his basket looked just a little heavier this morning. You don't have proof, but you don't need proof. You live with proof. You sweat for proof. You sleep in dust for proof. And now someone else is walking away with your grain in your basket. That evening you pay Menna a visit. Not a confrontation, just a hello, just a noticed you added a new lid to your pit, just a your donkey sounds healthier. He smiles too wide, offers you stale bread, talks too much, and says absolutely nothing. You leave without raising your voice. Because that's not how things work here. There's no real justice. Not for you. If you accuse him publicly, you'll need witnesses. If you go to the temple, you'll need a bribe. And if you retaliate privately, you'll risk being reassigned to a canal cleaning crew for 6 months. So instead, you write it down. That night, on your shadow tablet, you add a new line. Menna, 1 bundle, no evidence. We'll wait. You scratch it lightly, not for fear of it being found, but because even writing it makes your hand shake. You never thought it would be a neighbour. Not here, not during harvest, but hunger sharpens some people, and you're not the only one whose quota is behind. The next morning you wake early. You don't head straight to the field. You go to the exchange circle, a dusty patch where farmers leave notes for small trades. You carve a simple message into the sand with your stylus. Willing to share grain if the reason is true, no names, just honesty, you walk away. Later you pass by again. The wind has scattered half the letters, but one line has been added. Child sick, wife hungry. I am sorry. You stare at it. You wipe it away. That night you divide one of your bundles. You leave it wrapped in fresh reeds near the river edge. No name, no signature, just food. Because maybe that's what justice looks like here. Not punishment, just understanding. Historians still debate how tightly grain stores were monitored, whether theft was a crime or simply inevitable. But you know the truth. Sometimes grain disappears, and sometimes people just need it to. Your wife doesn't ask why you came back with 1 fewer bundle. Your daughter doesn't notice. But that night the frog on the doorstep is joined by a tiny clay figurine, a child holding a stalk of wheat. No one saw who placed it. You tuck it under your mat, not as a threat, but a thank you, and you add a new line to your shadow tablet. Forgiven, but not forgotten. You press your thumb into the clay, not hard, just deep enough to leave a mark. There's something crawling in the grain room. You hear it before you see it. A soft, scratchy whisper that sends chills down your spine. It's the kind of sound that makes the hairs on your arms stand up, even when the air is thick with heat and the scent of moldy straw. You open the reed mat curtain slowly. It's worse than you feared. The bundles, your bundles, the hard-earned back-breaking sheaves from a dozen blistered days, have been disturbed. One is split open, another has clearly shifted. And when you kneel down and lift a corner of the bottom row, your hand recoils. A scorpion. Small, dark. Its tail curved and twitching. Not the deadliest kind, but not a friend either. You grab a broken pot shard and flick it away, heart pounding. It skitters across the floor and disappears into a crack in the wall. You sit back, breathing hard. Then you notice the real problem. 3 of the bottom bundles are damp. Not just a little damp, soggy. The kind of soggy that smells like rot in the making. Your stomach sinks. You touch the wall. It's cool. Too cool. And then you see the culprit. A small crack in the corner, just wide enough for moisture to seep in from yesterday's sudden evening rain. It must have trickled in overnight, right into the lowest tier. You start to unstack them, but it's too late. There's mould. Not a lot, but just enough to be noticed. Just enough to ruin the tally if the scribes check too carefully. And you know they will. This isn't a harvest anymore, this is a test. You call Hoary. He helps you carry the worst bundles outside and spread them on reed mats. The sun's already climbing, but the humidity is stubborn. You flip the sheaves, try to shake out the worst of the mould, but the smell lingers. Think we can salvage them, he asks. You don't answer right away. You remember what the overseer said 3 seasons ago when another farmer tried to dry mouldy grain. If the gods smell rot, they turn their backs. not very encouraging. You try everything. You hang bundles from the rafters, hoping airflow will help. You roll them in dry reeds. You even ask your wife if she remembers the old barley poultice trick. Pack mouldy sheaves inside heated fig leaves to draw out the damp. She squints at you. That's for fever. Well, you mutter, the grain is sick. By late afternoon, the room smells like sun-warmed mildew and desperation. You're down 6 bundles. You're sweating through your tunic, and the scorpion reappears. This time, you squash it. You feel bad for a moment, but only a moment. That evening, a scribe arrives unannounced. Of course he does. He's not from your village. His accent marks him as someone from further up the river, maybe near the delta. His scroll is clean, his ink fresh. That means he's here to confirm someone else's report. You meet him outside. I'm inspecting grain storage integrity, he says with zero warmth. Yours is listed as potentially compromised. You fight the instinct to glare. Instead, you nod. Of course, right this way. You lead him inside, you show him the stacks, the ones you saved. The others? You move them to the shadow pile, a dry pit under your neighbour's old workshop. Covered, hidden, not perfect, but better than having them seen and struck from the record. The scribe walks slowly, squints at the ceiling, sniffs. He doesn't touch anything, but he doesn't smile either. He makes 2 notes, then leaves. You collapse beside the grain pile and let your head fall into your hands. You didn't lie, not exactly. You just edited. You saved what you could. You protected your season. Historians still debate whether Egyptian farmers were expected to declare every loss or simply maintain the appearance of abundance. But you know, if you confess, you lose. If you hide, you gamble. Today, you gambled. That night, as the sun sets behind the tamarisk trees and the frogs begin their watery choir, you sit beside your wife and try to explain. There was mould, you say, and a scorpion, and it felt like the walls turned against me. She listens quietly, then hands you a cup of water and brushes a twig from your shoulder. This house was built by your grandfather, she says, and his walls leaked too. You smile. I bet his scorpions were bigger. He said they wore sandals. Later, you update your shadow tablet. Wall leak, mould, scribe visit, grain moved, no penalty, yet. You press your stylus deeper than usual, then add a new mark. Not the false weight, not the sun, just a simple diagonal slash. You'll figure out what it means later. For now, it means almost disaster, almost discovered, almost gone, but not yet. You always thought the scribes were harmless. Annoying? Yes. Overdressed? Absolutely. But harmless. Just dusty men with too much eyeliner and too little sunburn, walking between the real work like they belonged to a different species. You never imagined one of them would become a threat. That changes today. You're in the fields before dawn as usual. The sky's the softest kind of pink, the kind that tricks you into thinking it might be a gentle day. You're hauling bundles from yesterday, hoping to get them dried before the river humidity settles in. Then you see him, the scribe with the green sash. He's leaning against a cart, arms folded, eyes on your row. You've seen him before, twice during inspections, once during a temple donation. But he never spoke to you. Now he walks straight up and says casually, "I know you're hiding grain." You blink. "What?" He shrugs. You moved bundles, unlisted, not marked, smelled like mould. Your heart skips, just once, then races. He smiles, a little too wide. "I don't care," he says. "I'm not here to report you." You say nothing, waiting. "I'm here," he continues, "because I need someone with access to the shadow stacks." Your eyes narrow. "You want grain?" "No," he says, brushing dust from his robe. "I want a favour." He pulls a small clay tag from his belt. You recognise it instantly. It's from the granary seal vault. A tag used to mark bundles for special exemption. It's not supposed to be outside the temple. It's not supposed to be in his hand. He tucks it away. "I place one of these on a stack," he says, "and it skips the normal tally. No weight, no loss. It disappears. Clean." You say nothing. "I do it 2, maybe 3 times a season. Helps balance the scrolls, keeps certain names in good standing." You glance around. No one's watching. I'm offering you a chance, he says. You pretend not to see, and I make sure no one ever inspects your bundles again. He smiles again. Forever. You don't answer. You don't need to. He walks away with the confidence of someone who's done this before, and always gotten a yes. Later, you tell Hori. He curses under his breath. You're going to refuse, right? You hesitate. He glares. Right? You sit under the acacia tree and rub your temples. If I refuse, you say, he might report me. He won't, Hori says. He needs your help. You shake your head. He needs a place to hide. He'll find another one, but if I say yes, I'm part of it. You're already part of it, Hori mutters. You think any of these ledgers are clean? You think about that. You think about the donkey, the mould, the bundle Mena took. You think about how hard you've tried just to survive honestly, and how little it's gotten you. That evening your daughter shows you a drawing, scratched into hardened mud with a reed. It's you, carrying a basket, smiling. You're the strongest, she says. You look at the picture, at the crooked lines, the smile that looks a little too big, the sun over your head, drawn with 15 rays. You wonder what she'll think if she ever reads a temple scroll with your name stamped in someone else's ledger. You wonder if your bundle will still feel like yours. That night you scratch a line onto your shadow tablet. Green sash. Offer made. No answer given. You stare at the space beneath it for a long time. Then you press your thumb into the clay. But not for approval, not for guilt, just as a mark, a pause. Because sometimes silence is the only move you're allowed. Historians still argue whether corruption in ancient Egypt was endemic or exaggerated, whether scribes skimmed out of survival or self-interest. But to you, corruption isn't a concept. It's a man with clean hands offering you a dirty deal. And you? You're just a farmer. You work with your hands. And tonight, your hands feel heavier than usual. You dream of scrolls that rewrite themselves, of bundles that whisper, of ink that bleeds into soil. You wake up sweating, not from fear, from the weight of knowing that somewhere, someone's already stamped your name, and you don't yet know what for. Your body is done. It doesn't say this politely. It says it by refusing to lift the next bundle, by making your knees lock halfway through a step, by sending a sharp jolt through your back when you try to bend, and then laughing, quietly, painfully, when you try again. Today is your last row of the harvest. You're not done harvesting entirely. Pharaoh's share still needs weighing, and temple scribes still need to make your fingers ache with signatures, but the cutting, the hauling, the endless repetition of sickle to stalk is nearly finished. You stare at the ground, the final stretch of golden stalks waiting like a test you're too tired to pass. You start slowly. No rhythm now, just motion. Cut, stop, breathe, cut, gasp. Adjust grip. You keep going because you've come this far, because walking away now would feel like digging a grave with a half-finished shovel. Hori works beside you. He's limping, not from injury, just from sheer exhaustion compacted into his bones like sediment. You pass him a cloth soaked in water and he grins weakly. "Remember when this field was green?" he says. You nod. "And we thought the harvest would go quick." You both snort. "Never again," you say. You say that every year. By midday, your hands are trembling. You've dropped the sickle twice. Your fingers are wrapped in so many strips of cloth that you can't feel the handle anymore. You stop. Sit down on a stump near the field's edge. Your daughter finds you there. She offers you a fig. Just one. Soft, overripe, sticky with sun. You eat it slowly, juice running down your chin. "You done yet?" she asks. "Almost," you say. She nods. "Good. You promised to help me build a bird trap." You smile. "Traps are easier than taxes." She thinks for a second. "Can I trap a tax?" You laugh. "For real." "I hope so. Make it a deep hole." You return to your final bundle. There's something sacred in the last one. Not because it's special, but because it's the last. The end of a long, aching road. You cut it gently, lift it, tie it with care. You don't rush. You mark this moment. And when it's stacked, you press your palm into the dust beside it. Not a ritual, just a note to yourself. I did this. I finished. That night, the celebration is small. There's no grand feast, no parade, Just tired farmers sitting in a half circle, drinking weak beer and chewing stale bread, occasionally tossing jokes at each other like stones that don't quite hit. Someone starts singing an old harvest song. It's off-key, slow, beautiful. You lean back, watching the stars emerge one by one. Your wife brings out a jar of oil and rubs it into your wrists. They're swollen, cracked, starting to scab over in strange patterns. You don't flinch. You just watch the way her fingers move. She's done this every season. She knows your bones better than the temple record does. Your shadow tablet, she says. How does it end? You shrug. It doesn't. She tilts her head. Even after the last bundle? Especially after, you say. You open the tablet one more time, add the line, harvest complete, final bundle clean, spine, debatable. Then beneath it, you add a new symbol. Not the false weight, not the sun. A tiny bundle mark, 2 lines crossed with a loop of string. You've never used it before. It means done, but not done with me. Later, as the others drift back to their huts, you stay by the field. You walk the edge one last time, watching the moonlight touch the cut stubble. The air smells of dust and figs and faint temple incense carried from the village. You hear frogs again. One croaks near your foot. You nod to it. Still here too, huh? It doesn't reply, which is fair. You sit at the field's edge and think about how long a season can feel, how days melt together until you only remember the burns and the bugs and the fear of not meeting the quota. But now, you've made it. The harvest is in. The bundles are stacked. The scribes are waiting. But for one night, just one, you're not waiting anymore. You're just breathing, alive, sore, whole, and not yet judged. Because tomorrow comes the real question. Was it enough? Did the gods count fairly? Did the scrolls record honestly? Did Pharaoh's shadow grow heavier or lighter? You don't know. But tonight, you rest. And that's worth recording too. The field is empty now. All the bundles have been hauled. The stalks cut clean. The last muddy footprints have dried into cracked impressions that will fade under the next wind. The sickles are hung. The donkeys stabled. The grain weighed, recorded, taxed, reweighed, then taxed again. All that's left to do is wait. Wait for the river to judge you, because that's what it does, the Nile. It's not just water or silt or irrigation or luck. It's memory. It remembers which fields pulled their weight, which farmers gave their due, which bundles were full and which were light, and it never forgets. You're summoned to the granary before sunrise. It's quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a tally is read aloud. You walk the dusty path with Hori beside you. He's got that resigned look again. The one he wore last time the flood came too low, and 3 families had their fields repossessed. At the granary gate, a priest scribe greets you. Same one with the green sash. He doesn't smirk this time. Just gestures to the side chamber. You and Hori sit cross-legged on woven mats. You wait. A second scribe arrives carrying a tablet. Not clay this time, papyrus, formal, final, clean. The priest unrolls it and reads, Field 12, harvest, 93 bundles, weight, sufficient, moisture, acceptable, taxed, fulfilled. You exhale, quietly. Then, grain loss declared during inspection, minimal, supplement provided via deferred bundle. Your head jerks slightly. Deferred bundle? You never declared that. Then you glance at the green sash. He gives the faintest nod. Of course. You played his game, or at least you didn't call it out. And now, he's balancing your books, whether you like it or not. Field 12, the priest continues, is cleared for ration extension through flood season. Family count preserved. You nod. You stand. You leave. And you feel nothing. Not yet. Back at the hut, your wife hugs you. Your daughter spins in circles, chanting something about extra bread. You eat a full portion of barley stew. It tastes better today. Not because the flavour changed, but because you can finally taste it without fear hanging from every spoonful. Later, you slip away to the river's edge. You bring your shadow tablet, and you write the final line. Cleared. Barely. Saved by silence. You stare at it. Then you set the tablet down beside you. You don't press a symbol. You don't carve your thumb. You just sit. You watch the Nile, sluggish in its low season, slide past like a god in no hurry to speak. You think about the bundles, the taxes, the donkey, the frog, the scribe, the child, the bread, the beads, the days when you were sure it would all collapse. But it didn't. Not yet. Maybe that's the best you get. Not victory, not glory, just not collapse. The sun slips low now, casting long shadows across the stubble of the cut field. The air has cooled, the frogs have begun their nightly song, and the village hum quiets to a sigh. You sit still, knees tucked up, palms flat against the ground. The earth is warm beneath you, familiar, solid, and it hums in a language older than any scroll. You were here. You endured. You mattered. The breeze picks up, soft and dry. It rustles the reeds by the river, carries the scent of grain dust and distant wood smoke. You close your eyes, breathing in slowly, letting your shoulders sink, your jaw unclench, your heartbeat soften to the rhythm of silence. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again. A new season, new quotas, a new flood to guess at and fear. But not tonight. Tonight, the ledger is closed. The sickle sleeps. The gods, if they're watching, have nothing left to demand. And you gave everything, and still have something left. That matters. So lie back if you like. Let the stars appear above you, one by one, like names whispered into a well-tended field. Let the coolness settle into your skin like a thank you. Let the quiet claim you. You've earned it. You've survived the Nile's judgment. For now. Good night, farmer. Good night, river. Good night. 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 Night, river.